This presentation is on Joseph Smith Jr. and the ongoing restoration. President Russell M. Nelson in the October 2021 General Conference stated, "The restoration is a process, not an event, and will continue until the Lord comes again." The restoration of other books will come forth by the power of the Lamb from the Gentiles. Nephi writes in chapter 13 of 1 Nephi, "And it came to pass that I beheld the remnant of the seed of my brethren, and also the book of the Lamb of God," which is the King James Version Bible that they brought over from England, "which had proceeded forth from the mouth of the Jew, that it came forth from the Gentiles unto the remnant of the seed of my brethren. And after it had come forth unto them, I beheld other books, which came forth by the power of the Lamb from the Gentiles unto them." In other words, it's going to be an ongoing restoration of biblical records. "Unto the convincing of the Gentiles and the remnant of the seed of my brethren, the Lamanites, and also the Jews who are scattered upon all the face of the earth, that the records of the prophets and of the 12 apostles of the Lamb are true." The keystone of our religion is the Book of Mormon. So let's take a look at some of the key events and some of the Hebrewisms that are part of this scripture that was preserved for our day. First, we see on September the 21st and 22nd, there are two visits by Moroni that was given on Sunday evening and into the morning of Monday. Then on the morning of September 22nd, 1823, the third visit Moroni to Joseph occurs. The next year is a leap year, so it's on September 22nd, 1824, on a Wednesday, that the fourth visit of Moroni occurs to Joseph. Then the next year, 1825, on a Thursday, that's the fifth visit by Moroni. Then the next year, September 22nd, 1826, that's the sixth visit. So now on the seventh visit, that Saturday on a Sabbath day, on September 22nd in 1827, Moroni is there to help and to encourage Joseph to open up the stone box and retrieve the golden plates. That is on the Hebrew calendar, or Rosh Hashanah, which is the Feast of the Trumpets. And then he starts to translate, and he gets the translation up through the book of Lehi, and they are lost, those 116 pages. The plates and the Urim and Thummim are taken from him. But guess what? On a Hebrew holiday on Sukkot, which is a Monday, September 22nd, the plates and the Urim and Thummim were returned. And that date in Hebrew calendar is the final gathering. The number 7, or in Hebrew Shiva, is regarded as the whole number in Hebrew and symbolizes the flawless completion of a task. For example, there are 7 days of creation. 7 branches were on the golden candlestick. 7 times the blood was sprinkled on the Day of Atonement. 7 times was the oil sprinkled upon the altar when it was consecrated. 7 days were required for consecrating the priests. 7 days were necessary for purifying the defiled. 7 times Naaman washed in the Jordan River. 7 days Jericho was besieged. 7 priests with 7 trumpets blew when the walls fell down. The Lamb had 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God, referenced in the book of Revelation. There are 7 seals are on God's book, also in the book of Revelation. So there were 7 visits from Moroni to receive the plates of Mormon. Not a coincidence. The Jewish celebration of Rosh Hashanah, or Feast of Trumpets, is also called the Day of Remembrance. It begins on a Friday evening as the sun sets on the first day of the 7th month of Tishri on the Judaic religious calendar. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, In the 7th month, in the first day of the month, shall ye have a Sabbath, a memorial of blowing of trumpets, and holy convocation. It was on the evening of September 22nd in 1827, the Saturday Sabbath, the very month and day Israel celebrated the Feast of Trumpets on the 1st of Tishri in the year 5588 on the Jewish calendar, that Moroni gave the plates to Joseph Smith Jr. Since this feast was traditionally used as a symbol for the gathering of Israel, it is unlikely this timing was accidental, as Joseph was asked to meet with Moroni for several years in a row on the anniversary date of his first visit, in preparation for that important and significant symbolic day. So when we look at the title page of the book, it's called the Book of Mormon, but in actuality, it's the original Book of Mormon, according to that title page. Therefore, when we look at it from that perspective, the first portion of the book is an abridgment of the record of the people of Nephi and also the Lamanites, but it's an abridgment of those records that were kept over 1,000 years. It's also an abridgment of the Book of Ether that was done by the people of that came over, were the children, the brother of Jared. So this portion is what we call the original Book of Mormon, on the large plates of Nephi that were abridged by Mormon, including the 24 gold plates that Moroni was able to abridge. And that is considered to be what was in the stone box, and that's the original Book of Mormon. And we don't have it because the Book of Lehi that was on the original were lost. Those pages were lost in the translation. The plates of Mormon were translated in Harmony, Pennsylvania. These are the original plates recovered from the stone box in the Oak of Morah. In this home, the prophet produced about 60% of the text of the Book of Mormon from the abridged plates of Mormon, which included a 1,000-year history. The Book of Lehi was the beginning of this through the words of Mormon to Moroni. It was edited by the prophet Mormon and his son Moroni. Those who hefted the plates as they moved them said that they weighed about 60 pounds. They were translated in 1829. Joseph was only 24 years of age during that time. It took less than 40 days to translate, from April 7th to early June of 1829. Martin Harris lost the Book of Lehi, and Emma was the scribe for a small portion of this of these plates, and Oliver Cowdery made no punctuation when he was a scribe. The testimony of the three witnesses is important because it's the abridged plates of Mormon in the stone box that were shown to them spiritually, and it was done by an angel of God from heaven. They said that it was the power of God and not of man that they were shown the plates, and that an angel of God came down from heaven and showed it to them. And then a voice of the Lord commanded them that they should bear record of them. And in the Book of Mormon, it even says in the Book of Ether that in the mouth of three witnesses shall these things be established, and the testimony of three. There is no mention in the Book of Mormon that there'd be an additional set of witnesses, let alone 8 witnesses. One of the underappreciated portions of the Book of Mormon is the importance of having Nephi go up to Jerusalem with his brothers to obtain these things called the plates of brass. Lehi was commanded to get them, and because of that, these plates of brass are going to be showing up throughout the Book of Mormon with specific passages that are not found in the Old Testament. And these plates of brass contain the record of the Jews, so therefore records that may have been written that were not part of the Old Testament that would come forth in the later days, according to Nephi, they might validate that the plates of brass contain some of those writings. So the plates of brass is the term that we use that's correct form of Hebrew, and not the brass plates, which is really an American English phrase. So to me, when I hear the words brass plates, it's not really talking about the Book of Mormon, because that is an Americanization of the plates of brass, which is a Hebrew expression. So the record of the Jews may have included additional facts not found in the Old Testament. Nephi said, I beheld other books which came forth. So I believe that the Book of Jasher is a candidate for being one of those other books. It was a manuscript found among the ruins during the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. That was the beginning of the Jewish exile or the diaspora. Cyrus, a military officer from the Iberian Peninsula, that's Spain and Portugal, who was under Roman Emperor Titus, discovered a Hebrew scholar hiding in a library with ancient rabbinical Hebrew manuscripts. It's without points, meaning it predates the Masoretes between the 7th and 10th centuries AD. Our King James Version, Old Testament, published in 1611, is a Masoretic text with points indicating which vowels are used. First printed in early Hebrew in Naples, Italy, they state it was around 1552, but they have yet to find that record. Then it was printed in Venice, in Italy, in 1625. It was translated in English in 1839 in Liverpool, and it was published in New York in 1840. An anonymous editor wrote in 2 Samuel, and also King David bade them, teach the children of Judah the use of the bow. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher. And in the book of Jasher, chapter 56, it says, And Jacob said unto Judah, I know, my son, that thou art a mighty man for thy brethren. Reign over them, and thy sons shall reign over their sons forever. Only teach thy sons the bow and all the weapons of war, in order that they might fight the battles of their brother, who will rule over his enemies. There are some correlations between the book of Alma and the book of Jasher. For example, the book of Alma, we read about Alma and Amalek being cast into the fire, and that they were there for 3 days, and then it was the power of God that delivered them, and it's because the Lord had granted them unto power according to the faith which was in Christ. Whereas in the book of Jasher, you get a similar story about two people. In this case, it's Abram and his brother Haran. And they were cast into fire, and they were there for 3 days and 3 nights. And they were finally delivered. And it's the God in heaven and earth in whom I trust, and who has all his power. He delivered me from the fire in which thou didst cast me. So it's a pretty interesting correlation that the book of Jasher has a similar story that we find in the book of Alma. In the book of Alma, we read from Captain Moroni. He says, Yea, he may cast us at the feet of our enemies, even as we have cast our garments at thy feet to be trodden under foot. Moroni then said unto them, Behold, we are a remnant of the seed of Jacob, yea, we are a remnant of the seed of Joseph, whose coat was rent, in other words, torn by his brethren into many pieces. Yea, now, behold, let us remember to keep the commandments of our God, or our garments shall be rent. Now, in the Old Testament, we don't see any reference to the coat of many colors being torn or rent by Joseph's brothers. Whereas in the book of Jasher, that was published 10 years after the Book of Mormon, we read, And Issachar said unto them, his brothers, Here is an advice for you, if it seem good in your eyes to do this thing. Take the coat which belongeth to Joseph and tear it, in other words, rend it, and kill a kid of the goats and dip it in its blood, and send it to our father. And they hastened and took Joseph's coat and tore it, and they killed a kid of the goat and dipped the coat in the blood of the kid, and then trampled it in the dust, and they sent the coat to their father. So you've got the tearing of the coat, trampling it in the dust, and we get Moroni wanting not their garments to be trodden underfoot. So the Book of Mormon is referencing ancient biblical sources that may have been on the plates of brass. We also see in that section of Alma, the book of Alma, where Moroni says that part of the remnant of the coat of Joseph was preserved and had not decayed. Now, you don't read anything about that in the Old Testament. However, there are some ancient Muslim records that say that the garment was of the weave pattern that Joseph had, that is of paradise, and the breath or the spirit odor of paradise was in it, so that the coat never decayed or in any way deteriorated. So again, the plates of brass must have had something to do with this information, because it's not found in the Old Testament, but it is found in the records of, let's say, biblical era type texts that Nephi saw that would come forth in the latter days. Continue with the book of Alma. We read that the Nephites had all power over their enemies, and more than 1,000 of the Lamanites were slain in a battle, while on the other hand there was not a single soul of the Nephites which was slain. We read in the book of Jasher something similar, and they approached and fought against the city and took it and subdued it, and they entered the city, and there died on that day 1,100 men of the people of the city, all that inhabited the city, but of the people besieging not one died. So the same orientation of information is found in both records. And again, the book of Jasher was published 10 years after the Book of Mormon. And in the book of Alma, or in the Old Testament, we don't read anything similar, but we are reading it in the book of Jasher. We also read something where they would dig a ditch around about the land in the city of Bountiful. We see the same pattern in the book of Jasher, where they dug ditches around between the city and the river, which surrounded the whole land of Cush, which is also, they mentioned the city of Cush in the book of Jasher. So you've got digging a ditch around the land or the city of Bountiful, or the land or the city of Cush. A good parallel. In Joshua, chapter 10 we have, and then spake Joshua to the Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel. And he said unto the sight of Israel, Sun, stand thou still upon Gibeon, and thou moon in the valley of Ajalon. And in the book of Jasher, we have the same information. Whereas in Joshua it says, and the sun stood still, and the moon stayed, until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. Whereas in the book of Jasher, until the nation shall have avenged itself upon its enemy. Then we get, is this not written in the book of Jasher and the book of Joshua? So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven, and hasted not to go down about a whole day. Whereas in the book of Jasher, and the Lord hearkened to the voice of Joshua, and the sun stood still in the midst of the heavens, and it stood still 36 moments, a period of time. And the moon also stood still and hastened not to go down a whole day. So there's a little bit more information that we're getting from the book of Jasher. And there was not a day like that before it or after it, and that the Lord hearkened to the voice of man, for the Lord had fought for Israel. And we get the same information in the book of Jasher. Now, if we compare the book of Jasher, saying, and the Lord hearkened to the voice of Joshua, and the sun stood still in the midst of the heavens, and it stood still 36 moments, we compare that to the book of Helaman. Yea, and he say, this is Mormon, the editor, if you say unto the earth, move, it is moved. Yea, if you say to the earth, thou shalt go back, that it lengthen out the day for many hours, it is done. And thus, according to his word, the earth goeth back, and it appeareth unto man that the sun standeth still. So notice I've got the sun stands still in the book of Jasher, and also in the book of Helaman. In the book of Jasher, it stood still 36 moments, and in the book of Helaman, it says it lengthened out the day for many hours. So really don't know what 36 moments mean, but it probably means many hours in a day. The small plates in Nephi were translated in Fayette, New York. These are the plates that were from the repository in the Hill Cumorah, and they were translated in the Peter Whitmer Sr.'s log cabin. In this home, the prophet produced about 40% of the text of the Book of Mormon from the small plates, and it's a 320-year history. The books of 1st Nephi to the Book of Omni are first-person accounts, like I Nephi, I Jacob, I Netus, I Jerem, so forth. The prophet Mormon is not abridging any of these records. Those who handled the plates, which included the 8 witnesses, they said that they weighed about 30 pounds. They were translated in June of 1829. It took less than 30 days to translate them. John Whitmer was also a scribe, and he scribed for parts of the book of 1st Nephi, and we get that from the handwriting from the original manuscript. And Oliver Cowdery was the main scribe. We can look at the handwriting of John Whitmer from 1 Nephi chapter 3, verses 15 through 18. This is from the Joseph Smith papers. Notice that John Whitmer has his letter D, which is on as an example of the word Lord. The last letter is D. Notice this little open face D with a big flourish to the left with a hook to it. Whereas Oliver Cowdery, who did the printer's manuscript, he has a different kind of cursive writing where you've got a kind of a closed face D with the loop coming down to the end of the lettering. So here I have an example of 1 Nephi chapter 3 verses 15 through 18, and I've underlined different words that end with the letter D, and notice that they all have that flourish of the D to the left in the upper left. So this is a kind of a definitive way of looking at the handwriting of John Whitmer versus Oliver Cowdery. Now this set of plates had the testimony of the 8 witnesses, and it was Joseph Smith who translated the work, has shown those plates to those 8 witnesses, and because of that, they were not only shown them, but they handled it with their hands, and they have seen and hefted them, and that's why I have said that those who hefted them said they weighed about 30 pounds. So they were smaller than the original plates that were in the stone box in the Hill Cumorah. And again, John Whitmer was the scribe. The 8 witnesses handled and hefted the small plates of Nephi to them by Joseph, which ended up being a physical witness. So the 3 witnesses had a spiritual witness. These 8 witnesses had a physical witness. You combine the two, including Joseph Smith, there's a total of 12 witnesses, and these are really the 12 disciples, if you want to call it, of the early church that were able to testify that the plates were actual plates and that they were able to see them and heft them. The beginning of the book of Nephi, in the first chapter, in the second verse, it says, Nephi said, I make a record in the language of my father, which consists of the learning of the Jews in the language of the Egyptians. Now, in that time frame, which was around 600 BC, that starts out this narrative, Demotic Egyptian was the popular form of Egyptian writing, which was a reformed Egyptian that was reformed from monumental Egyptian and hieratic Egyptian. So this is the correct way of saying what the language of the Egyptian was in the time that Nephi is writing this. So these characters that you see here are coming from John Whitmer, who is recording them. And he was a scribe, as I have shown for portions of 1 Nephi. And they were shown the plates and they hefted them. And so it's my contention here that John was able to get these plates and for a while and then copy the characters down. So here's an example of characters that I see here from the Demotic Egyptian from the Book of the Dead. And these are characters that come from the small plates of Nephi. And there's a very good high correlation of the two styles. So we know that the Demotic Egyptian from the Book of Dead is legitimate. It's been validated by many Egyptologists and researchers, whereas what we get on the character document is similar to what we see on the Book of the Dead. So the character document has Demotic Egyptian characters, which is a form of Reformed Egyptian derived from hieratic Egyptian, a shorthand of monumental Egyptian. Now, the character document is not the Anthon transcript. The Anthon transcript came from the plates that were in the stone box that had the first book called the Book of Lehi. And so that's an abridged record that Mormon did 1,000 years later. So a researcher up in Idaho did some analysis of those characters, and he has found multiple examples of each individual character on the character document as legitimate Demotic Egyptian characters in many different museums and articles that have been printed. So here's just an example. So when we look at how this could have happened, how they would have learned this Demotic Egyptian, we read about the King Zedekiah's daughters in Jeremiah, how the king's daughters and every person that Nebuchadnezzar, the captain of the guard, had left with Gedaliah, the son of Elukum, the son of Shaphan, and Jeremiah the prophet, and Baruch, the son of Neriah. So they came out of the land of Egypt. In other words, they escaped Jerusalem and they go to the land of Egypt, for they obeyed not the voice of the Lord, and they came even to Tapanis. So that's in Egypt. So you've got this group, what we call the Mulekites, or the people of Zarahemla, that we'll read about in the Book of Mormon, in the Book of Mosiah. Potentially, you see here that the Phoenicians were the navigators throughout the Mediterranean. There could have been a possibility that the daughters and the mother, the queen, and the little king, which is Mulek, which is really kind of the name of Mulek, means little king, they escape and they go on a Phoenician ship. There's two routes that they could have taken. One, what Columbus took through the Atlantic Ocean all the way over to the Caribbean, whereas Philip Beale, with his ship, the Phoenicia, they ended up in Florida. Or they could have gone north, where they were known to go up to the tin mines up in what we now call Cornwall. And from there, they could have taken the John Cabot route, which he's the one that legitimately ended up having his feet into North America and through the St. Lawrence waterway route. So if we look at it from that perspective, there might be some reasons why we see some of these Phoenician characters showing up in that area. When we look at Judah, the son of Jacob, he has through his line King Zedekiah. Then we've got his son Mulek. You've got now the people of Zarahemla. We call that the Mulekites. From that group, we have people of Hagoth. They go north, and we might see derivation of what those people did by going to where we call the Micmacs. Now, the Micmacs were a group of Native Americans that lived up in the Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, that area. And 60% of the Micmacs have this haplogroup X. I put X in because the people from the Palestine area have predominantly in their haplogroup of DNA a group called X, and the Micmacs have that same haplogroup. So if we look at the Demotic Egyptian that we have determined to be the case from the Nephite record, we can see that the Micmacs have the same kind of script. So I believe that the John Cabot route might have been a legitimate way that the people of Zarahemla that we read about in the Book of Mormon came through, or they could have gone through that, ended up in Zarahemla, but then when the people of Hagoth went north, they would have landed up in this area, and some of those people that were on those ships, which were quite a few thousand, that they might have decided not to go forward and remained in this area. So when we look at the book of Jasher and we see something about the small plates of Nephi, one of the things that we read about in the book of Jasher that we'll see that has a correlation to the small plates is how Moses, when he is in Egypt, sees his brethren, and then there's some wickedness going on where the Egyptians are smiting them. So because of that, the Pharaoh heard of this affair, and he ordered Moses to be slain. So God sent his angel, and he appeared unto the Pharaoh in the likeness of the captain of the guard. And the angel of the Lord took the sword from the hand of the captain of the guard, and took his head off with it. For the likeness of the captain of the guard was turned into the likeness of Moses. So when we read the incident in the book of Nephi about Laban having his head cut off, let's look at the parallels. So we get a presence of an angel. In the book of Jasher, God sends his angel. In 1 Nephi, after the angel departed. Second correlation is the office of a military commander. In Jasher, he's the captain of the guard. In Nephi, Laban commands 50, so he's a commander. The use of the victim's own sword for the beheading. In Jasher, he took the sword of the captain of the guard and took his head off with it. Nephi, I smote his head with his own sword. And finally, the likeness of the victim. Jasher says, in the book of Jasher, it says the guard was turned into the likeness of Moses. And in First Nephi, Nephi says, I commanded him in the voice of Laban. So the correlation is pretty high here. Lucifer is also known as a light bearer. And in the second book of Nephi, Nephi says, according to the things which I have read, could he have been reading from the plates of brass? Yes, he was. He must needs suppose that an angel of God, according to that which is written, had fallen from heaven, wherefore he became a devil, having sought that which was evil before God. We don't read anything about that in the Old Testament. Also, Joseph Smith received a vision, and it's called the Book of Moses, where Moses says, blessed be the name of my God, for his spirit hath not altogether withdrawn from me, or else where is thy glory? For it is darkness unto me, and I can judge between thee, that is Satan, or Lucifer, and God. So what we get is something that's remarkable that comes from the forgotten books of Eden that was found in Ethiopia and written in Arabic, and it was translated in 1882 in English. Then when God, who is merciful and full of pity, heard Adam's voice, he said unto him, O Adam, so long as the good angel was obedient to me, a bright light rested upon him and on his host. But when he transgressed my commandment, I deprived him of that bright nature, and he became dark. And when he was in the heavens, in the realm of light, he knew not of darkness. But he transgressed, and I made him fall from heaven upon the earth, and it was this darkness that came upon him. I find that remarkable. So, when we read again how Nephi says that the records of the prophets, that is Lehi, Moses, Jacob, Samuel, the Lamanite, and so forth, are true, these are some examples that these other records that have come forth much later and are testifying of these prophets. Jacob also says that the devil and his angels, and they shall go away into everlasting fire. So you get devil and his angels. Also in the book of Helaman, behold, we are surrounded by demons. Yea, we are encircled about by the angels of him who has sought to destroy our souls. So you get devil and angels. So we've got this revolt of Satan in the battle in heaven, and this is coming from a book called The Cave of Treasures that come from the Vatican Library, and it was translated in English in 1927. And when the prince of the lower order of angels saw that great majesty had been given unto Adam, he was jealous of him from that day, and he did not wish to worship him. And he said unto his host, You shall not worship him, and ye shall not praise him with the angels. It is meet that you should worship me, because I am fire and spirit, and not that I should worship a thing of dust, which hath been fashioned of fine dust. And the rebel mediating these things would not render obedience to God, and his own free will he asserted his independence and separated himself from God. But he was swept away out of heaven and fell, and the fall of himself and all his company from heaven. Remarkable coincidence, right? That Joseph Smith got all this right. It just supports the fact that the Book of Mormon has ancient source documents, and these other records that have come forth are testifying of that fact. Again, Nephi said, Behold other books which came forth, also in the Doctrine and Covenants, section 107. These things were all written in the book of Enoch and are to be testified in due time. You get Genesis chapters 6 through 8 in Joseph Smith translation of the Bible. Enoch through Noah is the book of Moses, chapters 6 through 8, that was revealed to him in 1831. You've got First Enoch, Ethiopic Giaz, English book published in 1838. You got Second Enoch, that's the Church Slavonic English version published in 1896. The Third Enoch, Hebrew Sefer Hekaloch, that's English published in 1928. The Sefer Yahashar, that's chapter 3, English published in 1840. So let's take a look at this in the Book of Mormon. We've got shake off the chains which ye are bound. The devil will grasp the wicked with his everlasting chains. The adversary lays snares that he might encircle people with his chains. Those who die in their sins shall be chained down to everlasting destruction. May the Lord grant unto you repentance, that you be not found bound by chains of hell. Have mercy on me, who am encircled by the chains of death. So let's take a look at these statements from the book of Enoch. With chains shall they be bound, and in their assembling place of destruction shall they be imprisoned. There my eyes saw how many were made their instruments, iron chains of immeasurable weight. For whom are these chains being prepared? They are being prepared for the host of Azazel, that's Satan. And I saw there the host of the angels of punishment going, and they held scourges and chains of iron and bronze. So now let's take a look at, did Samuel the Lamanite read First Enoch on the plates of brass? So in Helaman we read, for your destruction has already come upon you, and your destruction made sure. Yea, in that day you shall say, oh, that we had remembered the Lord our God in the day he gave us our riches, and then they would not have become slippery that we should lose them. Behold, our riches are gone from us. In First Enoch we go, on to you rich, for you have trusted in your riches, and from your riches you shall depart, because you have not remembered the Most High in the day of your riches. He who hath created you will overthrow you, and for your fall there shall be no compassion, and your Creator will rejoice at your destruction. So I have 6 elements over here. I have 6 elements over here. And then if I look at it from a chiastic point of view, you get A, B, C, and over here they have the same structure, but in reverse. It's like a chiastic structure. So if we look at this statement in Helaman, we can say that Joseph Smith did not plagiarize texts from the New Testament, because in the New Testament we read in Luke, woe unto you that are rich, for you received your consolation. That's all you get. In James chapter 5, go to now, ye rich men, and then it says, and the cries of them have reaped are entered in the ears of the Lord of Sabbath. For ye have lived in pleasure on the earth, and have been wanton. Ye have nourished your hearts, and as in a day of slaughter. So, there's some semblance, and it may be that James and Luke are actually referencing parts of the book of Enoch, whereas in the book of Helaman, it looks like it's a direct quote. Look at the original manuscript that was in the Bodleian Library in England that was done, translated by Richard Lawrence. You can see that you shall be removed because you have not remembered the Most High in the days of your prosperity, whereas in the R.H. Charles translation, 1912, you shall depart because you not remember the Most High in the days of your riches. So the R.H. Charles translation is more in line with what we read in the book of Helaman. Therefore, I believe that his translation is more accurate than Richard Lawrence's translation. In the book of Moses that was revealed to Joseph Smith in 1830, we read that God weeps. And how is it the heavens weep and shed forth their tears as the rain upon the mountains? And Enoch said unto the Lord, how is it thou canst weep? Whereas in Enoch we read, oh, that mine eyes were a cloud of waters, that I might weep over you and pour down my tears as a cloud of waters, which is like rain. In third Enoch, in that moment, the right hand of God, the Son, was weeping, and there went forth from his 5 fingers 5 rivers of tears, 5 rains. In the book of Moses, we read, and Enoch spake forth the words of God, the people trembled and could not stand in his presence. In the first Enoch, Enoch went and spoke to them all together, and they were all afraid, and fear and trembling seized them. In the book of Jasher, men sought for him and desired again to see the face of Enoch and to hear his word, but they could not, as all the sons of men were greatly afraid of Enoch, and they feared to approach him on the account of his godlike awe that was seated upon his countenance. And in Moses, we see that the doings of the children of men were shown to Enoch, and wherefore Enoch knew and looked upon their wickedness and their misery and wept, and all eternity shook. And in first Enoch, and I, Enoch, wept with a great weeping, and my tears stayed not till I could no longer endure it. And all the deeds of men in their own order were shown to me, and I wept and was troubled. In second Enoch, and I Enoch saw all the forefathers from the time from Adam and Eve, and I sighed and broke into tears. And in Moses, and the day shall come that the earth shall rest, but before the day the heavens shall be darkened, and a veil of darkness shall cover the earth, and the heavens shall shake, and also the earth. And the first Enoch says, and a great trembling seized me, and fear took hold of me, and my loins gave way. And when he had raised me up, my spirit returned, for I had been not able to endure the look of his host, and the commotion and the quaking of the heaven. The book of Moses, we learn about the language of Adam. The man of holiness is his name, and the name of his only begotten is the Son of Man, even Jesus Christ, a righteous judge who shall come in the meridian time. In the first Enoch, we get, and there was a great joy amongst them, and they blessed and glorified and extolled, because the name of that Son of Man had been revealed unto them. In Moses, and he beheld Satan, he had a great chain in his hand, and it veiled the whole face of the earth with darkness. And we see that also. And there mine eyes saw how they made the instruments, iron chains of immeasurable weight, and I asked the angel of peace who went with me, for whom are these chains being prepared? In the book of Genesis, we read about the Lord appeared unto Abraham in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent in the heat of the day, and he lifted up his eyes, and lo, 3 men stood by him. So we get 3 men, whereas in the Joseph Smith translation, and the angels which were holy men, and were sent forth after the order of God, turned their faces. We get this in the book of Jasher, and the Lord appeared to him in the plain of Mamre, and sent 3 of his ministering angels to visit him. And he was sitting at the door of the tent. He lifted his eyes and saw, and lo, 3 men were coming. So it looks like Joseph Smith was spot on, because again, the book of Jasher got published in English in 1840, 10 years after this revelation that he received. So who are these 3 men? According to the Babylonian Talmud, these 3 men were the angels Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael. Michael, who came to announce Sarah that she was to give birth to a son. Raphael, who came to heal Abraham after circumcision. And Gabriel, who went to overturn Sodom. And in the Doctrine and Covenants, Joseph Smith says he heard many voices, and he also heard the voice of Michael the archangels, and the voice of Gabriel, and of Raphael, and of divers angels from Michael or Adam, down to the present time, all declaring their dispensation, their rights, their keys, their honors, and their majesty, their glory and the powers. And in Enoch we see, and he said to Enoch, this is the first, Michael, the merciful, long-suffering, and the second, who is set over the diseases and all the wounds of the children of men, is Raphael, and the third, who is set over the powers, is Gabriel. In the book of Moses, we learned there came forth a great famine in the land, and the Lord cursed the earth with a sore curse. In the book of Jasher, the Lord continued to destroy the seed in those days, so that there was neither sowing nor reaping in the earth. So that correlates. In the D&C 107, God called upon Canaan in the wilderness in the 40th year of his age. The book of Jasher says, and Canaan grew up and was 40 years old, and he became wise. So that correlates. I also have shown that the prophet Enoch and the prophet Joseph Smith have similar pedigree and certain things in their life that parallel one another. So the prophet Enoch was called in his youth. Joseph was called in his youth. The Spirit of God descended out of heaven abode upon Enoch, and the same happened with Joseph. Both God the Father and the Son visited Joseph. Joseph saw the angel Moroni in his bedroom. And Enoch also said, on the first day of the month, I, Enoch, was in my house, resting on my bed alone, resting in my bed, and slept. And there appeared to me 2 men. Their faces were shining like the sun, and they were standing at the head of my bed and began to call me by my name. Same thing happened to Joseph with Moroni. We also have the prophet Enoch said that there shall be mine abode, and it shall be called Zion, and it shall come forth and all creations which I have made. And Joseph Smith was going to the same location that Enoch created his city, and it was known as the City of Zion or the City of Enoch. We get that in section 78. Again, Enoch saw Michael, Raphael, and Gabriel. Same with Joseph. He sees Michael, Raphael, and Gabriel. And in chapters 3 through 22 on the church Slavonic, second Enoch, the prophet Enoch has shown 10 heavens. And Joseph Smith in his history said, Paul saw the third heavens and I more. He went, Joseph Smith, to more than 3 heavens. Another correlation is the Book of Abraham that was given to him in 1835. We read about Abraham seeing the stars. The great one was called Kolob. He also sees Kokab, which is a star, and he sees a moon called Olier. And he also said Kokabim, which signifies stars. So in the Book of Abraham, Kolob is a great one. The Book of Enoch and First Enoch, one star is larger than the rest. Kokab is a star. In First Enoch, Kokabel taught the constellations, which are stars. Kokabim are stars. Kokbiel, who is appointed over the planets. Kokabiel, the angel of the stars. And then you have Olier, reflected solar light, and Ophaniel is over the globe of the moon. So these are really high correlations. Joseph Smith did actually translate a legitimate Book of Abraham. So finding passages of these ancient texts after the Book of Mormon, which was published in 1830, silences the belief that Joseph plagiarized works from other authors. For example, the View of the Hebrews is an 1823 book written by Ethan Smith, who was a Congregationalist minister in Vermont, who argued that the Native Americans were descended from the lost 10 tribes of Israel. Numerous commentators on Mormon history, from LDS Church General Authority B.H. Roberts to Fawn Brody, a biographer Joseph Smith, have noted similarities in the content of the View of Hebrews and the Book of Mormon. And then there's Solomon Spaulding, who was an American author who wrote an unpublished historical romance about the lost civilization of the mound builders of North America called The Manuscript Found. And it was never published. After Spaulding's death, a number of individuals suggested that his work was used as a source for Joseph Smith for the Book of Mormon. But all of that is debunked, because you can see that I have shown many examples that other records that have come forth are being validated by what's in the Book of Mormon. So I beheld other books which came forth by the power of the Lamb from the Gentiles. So I offer 2 books for you that can be purchased through Digital Legend Press or through my Beacon Light Books website, or Amazon, or through Rod Meldrum's website, is with his Book of Mormon Evidence, Firm Foundation. So I offer the Book of Jasher, annotated edition, and the books of Enoch, all of them, plus much content that you can't find anywhere else. And some additional insights, we can see that the sons of men in those days took from the cattle of the earth and the beasts of the field and fowls of the air and taught the mixture of animals of one species with another, in order therein to provoke the Lord. And God said the whole earth was corrupt, and all flesh had corrupted its ways upon the earth, all men and all animals. So, we're getting that in our world of transgenderism now, that we're corrupting what God has created by nature. And the Lord afterward remembered Dinah, the wife of Laban, and she conceived and bare 2 daughters. And Laban called the names of his daughters the name of the elder Leah, and the name of the younger Rachel. So Jacob was deceived because Leah looked like Leah, perhaps. So the book of Jasher gives us that insight. Another one, and Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw, and behold, a ram was caught in the thicket by his horns. That was the ram which the Lord God had created in the earth in the day that he made earth and heaven. For the Lord had prepared this ram from that day to be a burnt offering instead of Isaac. So Jesus was prepared or foreordained for his ultimate sacrifice. So this becomes a really clearer understanding of that ram and the importance of that ram. And Joseph said unto Benjamin, look now at this instrument, and understand where thy brother is in Egypt, whose you said went down to Egypt. And Benjamin beheld that instrument with the map of the stars of heaven, and he was wise and looked therein to know where his brother was. And Benjamin divided the whole land of Egypt into 4 divisions, and he found that he who was sitting upon the throne before him was his brother Joseph, and Benjamin wondered greatly. Now, Joseph Smith described the Nephite interpreters as a curious instrument which the ancients called Urim and Thummim. David Whitmer learned during his very first meeting with Joseph that by the means of the Urim and Thummim, Joseph was able to see in detail actions many miles away. In late May, at the request of Oliver Cowdery and Joseph, David traveled from Fayette, New York, over 100 miles to Harmony to take the two men back to his father's farmhouse so they could complete the translation. As he neared Harmony, he was surprised to meet Joseph and Oliver, who were coming toward me and met me some little distance from the house. Oliver told me that Joseph had told him when I started from home where I had stopped for the first night, how I read the sign at the tavern, where I stopped the next night, and that I would be there that day before dinner. And this was why they had come out to meet me, all of which was exactly as Joseph had told Oliver, at which I was greatly astonished. So here we get a record, a historical, an account that talks about an instrument where Joseph could look into it and see things and see people, just as Benjamin was able to look into an instrument and see where his brother was sitting on the throne in Egypt. I testify that the Book of Mormon truly is an ancient document. The ancient sources are found within it. That the plates of brass was a critical part of the story of going to Jerusalem to retrieve those plates, and that excerpts of those from those plates in the plates of brass are found throughout the Book of Mormon and have been validated by other records that have come forth in our day that have been translated from ancient languages into English. And I testify of this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.